Rudy, I guess we can begin with the Auditor General's report today, talking about how much money it's going to cost us for those F-35 jets, how much we overspent. Not that we didn't know, of course, for the Arrive Can app. My question is that, the Prime Minister's hearing all this at the same time we are. Obviously, he knew about this sooner. What does he do here, or is there anything he can do here?
Look, it's very difficult. It's like the Groundhog Day of every government in terms of, remember during the Mulroney years, it was the Sea-King helicopters. And during the Chrétien years, it was, for example, the submarines. And even during the Harper years, we started discussing the F-35. We were supposed to buy it. The Trudeau Liberals, when it comes to Justin Trudeau, canceled it to again go back to the F-35. And now we are realizing that it's going to cost more. There's going to be delays. And most importantly, there was bad planning. So the problem is, for example, we don't have the infrastructure, even when we're going to get those F-35 to host them, for example, in Bagotville in Quebec or in Cold Lake, Ontario. So that's a problem of planning. But also it's a problem that we are not going to have the planes that are going to be able to defend us in the timetable. And it's going to cost us more money. Why? Because it was delayed. And obviously the costs were not properly assessed. So it's kind of always the same thing when it comes to defense in Canada. I don't think it's a conservative or a liberal issue. I just think we have a problem making a decision and basically sticking to that decision, because even right now, Prime Minister Carney isn't going to say if we're going to buy the full 88 F-35 or he's going to maybe renegotiate the contract, maybe look at buying some from the European, for example. So I believe that we're going to still be in the same situation maybe in a year or two, when there's going to be maybe perhaps another decision on the F-35, maybe less planes and maybe having some from the European, for example.
Yeah, although, he's going to that big NATO meeting, which is why he made yesterday that announcement over military spending. To some degree, he can't just walk away from this deal, right? He has to find a middle ground somehow.
Yes, no, he needs to. And look, at the end of the day, we have to think about the women and the men who are serving. It's always the same thing. We send our soldiers, and either they don't have the right tanks or the right armored vehicles. Sometimes they don't have the right helmets. Sometimes they don't have the right uniforms. And it's the same, for example, for the Air Force or for the Navy. So I think that in Canada, we need to have a discussion when it comes to military procurement, doing it good, doing it right, in time, on budget. But when you look at the last 20, 30 years, it's never been the case.
All right, let me move on from that. And by the way, do you want to talk about Arrive Can at all, or can we move beyond that?
It's interesting because, sometimes the Auditor General, when she tables a report, she makes recommendation and saying, oh, this needs to be improved or that needs to be improved. When it comes to Arrive Can, she didn't make any recommendations. She just said, can you please follow the rules and make sure that, when we give a contract, people actually give services for that contract. Because the problem with Arrive Can is that we paid close to $100 million to a company who hasn't delivered services, and they were paid without checking anything. So the Auditor General was very harsh, saying, look, can we just follow? We have some rules and regulation. Can they just be followed? Yeah. And in that case, we just paid without having any services.
To that point, you're right. And that thing I think for a lot of people, that's what stuck out. Said, look, we don't need new rules. We just need the existing rules that have been designed for someone to follow and say, okay, if you don't satisfy that rule, you don't keep getting a check from the government. So I wonder, Rudy, as much as you can blame, this company that did all this business with the government for the two people at GC Consulting, whatever it was called, where's the person in government or the people in government who simply kept sending them the checks when the work wasn't done? Where's the responsibility there?
We can ask the same question with SACLIC in Quebec and the inquiry that is happening right now, and how come they were paid $500 million more when actually the work hasn't been done or hasn't been done properly. So I think you're asking a very correct question. How come the federal government, provincial government are paying suppliers when work is not being done? And how come we have so many civil servants who are supposed to check those things and basically don't do their job?
Well, we can ask. I wonder if anything will come of the asking, though. So I guess we'll have to wait and see. Let me get you to weigh in on the G7 summit, which is coming up in Alberta. Already a little bit of controversy. A couple of people now we found out are coming, including Narendra Modi from India. Now we found out the Saudis will be sending, the head of government there. And this has created some controversy. Is this fair or not?
Look, it's interesting because we call it the G7, but it's not going to be a G7 from the numbers of countries that have been invited or who are attended, I believe we are close to 14 because you just mentioned India is coming, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, Mexico, and South Korea, Australia, Brazil. So it's kind of close to a G20. Look, I believe that it's good and it's smart from Prime Minister Carney because he's a newly elected Prime Minister. He needs to have relationship with those countries. So it's good to take the opportunity that Canada is hosting to invite and to have a personal relationship with those head of government or head of state. And also it kind of, you don't have to travel after they're coming to our country. So I believe that it's good. I believe that you cannot have a discussion on the economy and the world economy, for example, without having India. And I do believe that you cannot talk about the Middle East or what's happening in that region without involving, for example, Saudi Arabia. Yes, there's issues between Canada and Saudi Arabia or Canada and India, but at the same time, if we're inviting partners and we want to discuss, for example, critical minerals, or we want to discuss Canada's energy super policy, we need to have those countries at the table. And also when it comes to Ukraine, for example, and foreign affairs. But it's kind of interesting that we are calling it the G7, but it's more the G13 or G14 because even Ukraine also has been invited.
You know, I understand the part, and you're right. I think it's probably smart of Mark Carney to invite these countries. These are countries who want to either establish or increase relationships with, given what we are now dealing with the U.S., but Donald Trump is going to be here as well, right? So that's already been confirmed. You kind of wonder, can we do both?
Yes, look, it's going to be very important. First of all, Mr. Trump is going to be there. There's a lot of bilateral issues that we need to discuss with the U.S., but also Mexico is coming, which is very interesting also at the same time, because don't forget, we are supposed to have a negotiation with the U.S. and with Mexico when it comes to the new NAFTA. And even Mexico asked, for example, for a bilateral meeting with the U.S. in Canada. So it's going to be an interesting dynamic. Don't forget that in the past, we used to have what we called the Three Amigos, where the Canada, U.S., and Mexico were supposed to meet every couple of years, and it's been canceled for the past, I think, 3 or 4 years. So it's going to be interesting to have both the U.S., but also having Mexico at the table, because I don't believe that we can talk about trade and even security without Mexico, and that's a big question that we need to answer.
Just as a final question, do you actually think we see something substantive come from this?
I don't believe so, but I do believe that the work that is going to be the personal relationship, for example, it's so much easier. And I've been in government in the past when you have those kinds of meetings, when you know who's who in the government, when you have established links, for example, between prime ministers and head of government, to actually pick up the phone and have some meaningful conversation. Not only, I'm not talking about the U.S., but I'm talking also about all the other countries, especially with a new prime minister and a new minted prime minister.
Well, we were about to find out. Rudy, thanks so much. Appreciate it.